Hi, automotive enthusiasts. Welcome to Octane Origins, where today we dive into a machine that carries both dust and dreams on its tires, the 2017 Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled. At first glance, it might look like just another retro-styled motorcycle, one more throwback wrapped in nostalgia for the golden days of motorcycling. But under its high front fender, long travel suspension, and rugged stance is a story about identity, about heritage reborn, and about the difficult balance between style and substance. The Desert Sled is not just an accessory for Sunday cafe rides. It is a statement from Ducati, a company known more for racetrack pedigree than for desert trails, that they too could build a bike tough enough to honor an untamed past. When this model arrived in 2017, the motorcycle market was at an interesting crossroads. Riders were craving vintage looks, but many were equally demanding real capability. Machines that didn't just look the part, but could withstand the punishment of gravel, sand, and unpredictable backroads. The Scrambler lineup had already found success by blending approachable performance with playful retro design, yet critics argued that these bikes were more about lifestyle branding than off-road grit. Enter the Desert Sled, Ducati's answer to the skeptics. An homage to 1960s and 70s California desert racing, where stripped-down twins and singles blasted across barren landscapes in an era when toughness meant everything. This bike brought back that name and that spirit, but with modern engineering and the challenge of convincing riders that it wasn't just a costume. What we will explore today is not just how the Desert Sled came to be, but why it mattered, and what it revealed about the shifting culture of motorcycling. We will look closely at the heritage Ducati tapped into, the engineering decisions that defined its transformation from stylish scrambler to rugged retro enduro, and the impact this bike had on the way manufacturers and riders thought about the off-road revival. Along the way, we'll uncover the stakes Ducati faced when entering a territory dominated by Japanese dual sports and specialized adventure bikes, and how the Desert Sled carved out its own cultural lane. If you have ever wondered how a motorcycle can connect distant eras, bridging carefree 1960s desert racing with the curated lifestyle of modern riders, this is the story. Stay with me, because over the next few chapters we'll see how Ducati blended past and present, and why the Scrambler Desert Sled became more than a nostalgic tribute. It became a marker of how much a brand can stretch, and how much a rider can rediscover when a motorcycle dares to cross sand, time, and expectation all at once. The Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled did not arrive in a vacuum. It was born into a world of shifting motorcycling tastes, where retro styling was booming, but true off-road credibility was in short supply. Riders were surrounded by machines that looked rugged, but often faltered when the pavement ended. Ducati saw an opening, but it wasn't without risk. They were stepping into territory that Japanese manufacturers had dominated for decades, and the challenge was whether Italian flair could genuinely survive in the dust. Microstory, a California desert dream. In the 1960s, Southern California became the playground for riders who stripped their street bikes of unnecessary weight and pointed them toward wide-open desert. These early desert sleds were not factory-built machines, but backyard experiments. Triumph twins, Harley flatheads, and even early Hondas toughened up for the brutal terrain. It was a movement driven by passion, not marketing, and it cemented the phrase desert sled as a badge of authenticity. Ducati's decision to revive that name in 2017 was bold. It tied their Scrambler line to a tradition that demanded toughness, not just nostalgia. Context Digest, the Scrambler revival. Ducati had reintroduced the Scrambler family in 2015, positioning it as fun, approachable, and stylish, a counterpoint to their serious superbikes and muscular monsters. It was an instant hit, appealing to younger riders and lifestyle buyers with its bright colors and customization options. Yet some enthusiasts dismissed it as a fashion piece, a machine better suited to urban streets and photo shoots than to serious riding. That criticism created the backdrop against which the Desert Sled would need to prove itself. Microstory, reinforcing the frame. To answer skeptics, Ducati's engineers reimagined the Scrambler platform for rough use. They reinforced the frame with extra bracing, swapped in longer suspension travel, and added a swing arm designed to handle impacts. These changes weren't cosmetic. They altered the bike's geometry, making it more stable on uneven surfaces. It was a transformation meant to say, this is not just another variant, but a Scrambler capable of honoring its namesake. Context Digest, competing in the dirt. At the time, Japanese dual sport bikes like the Yamaha WR2150R or Suzuki DR Z400 were the go-to options for riders seeking durability off-road. They lacked the retro charm but offered proven reliability. Ducati's gamble was that a bike could combine modern toughness with vintage soul, pulling riders who wanted both. The Desert Sled would be judged not just on looks, but on whether it could survive the same trails as its utilitarian rivals. Microstory, the ergonomics shift. A key part of the Desert Sled's credibility came from its riding position. Ducati redesigned the seat height and handlebar placement to give riders more control when standing on the pegs, a necessity for dirt riding. The wide handlebars provided leverage in sand, and the higher seat added ground clearance. These details showed Ducati had studied what off-road riders needed, proving that authenticity could live in ergonomics as much as in engineering. Reflection bridge. What began as a styling exercise in the Scrambler line was now being reshaped into a test of functional durability. Microstory, naming. As a statement, calling the bike the Desert Sled was a declaration. Ducati could have chosen a safe name like Scrambler Adventure or Scrambler Enduro, but instead they resurrected a term soaked in Americana and rebellion. That choice told riders this bike was more than Italian styling. It was a cultural handshake with decades of desert racing tradition. But could the name live up to the performance when real riders put it to the test? Context Digest. The weight question. At nearly 450 pounds wet, the Desert Sled was no featherweight compared to smaller dual sports. Some critics argued this limited its off-road potential, yet Ducati countered that its power-to-weight ratio and suspension setup made it capable of moderate to serious trail work while offering more comfort and style on the road. The debate underscored the fine line Ducati was walking between retro adventure and hardcore dirt bike. Microstory. A market turning point. Around 2017, the adventure and scrambler markets were converging. BMW's GS models had shown that big bikes could thrive off-road in the right hands, while Triumph's Scrambler had stoked interest in retro trail machines. Ducati sensed that the sweet spot lay somewhere in between, lighter and more playful than a full-size adventure bike, yet tougher than a fashion scrambler. The Desert Sled was their attempt to hit that middle ground. Reflection bridge. By staking its claim in this contested territory, Ducati wasn't just building a motorcycle. They were testing their ability to expand identity beyond racing DNA. Microstory. Styling with purpose. The Desert Sled's visual cues, spoked wheels, off-road tires, high fender, weren't just for show. These design elements directly supported its functionality. Spoked wheels could flex under impact, dual sport tires gave traction in sand, and the elevated fender prevented mud from clogging. Riders who examined the details realized this bike had been built with real-world off-road use in mind, even if it wasn't a pure competition machine. Context Digest Lifestyle. Meets capability, Ducati marketed the Desert Sled not only as a tool for adventure, but as a lifestyle object. Campaigns showed riders blasting through deserts one moment, then rolling into a city cafe the next. This dual identity was intentional. A bike for those who wanted weekend dirt thrills without sacrificing everyday urban appeal. It was a balancing act few competitors had mastered. Microstory. The suspension story. One of the Desert Sled's crowning features was its long travel suspension, allowing nearly 8 inches of movement up front and over 7 in the rear. That translated into real-world resilience on rocky paths and sand washes. Riders reported the bike soaking up punishment better than expected, bridging the gap between retro design and modern engineering. It was proof that Ducati's engineers had done more than slap on knobby tires. So by the time the Desert Sled rolled into showrooms, it carried both the promise of honoring history and the pressure of proving function. What happened next would show whether Ducati's gamble could truly pay off when culture and capability collided. The moment the Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled left the polished floors of the showroom and hit real trails, the question of credibility became impossible to ignore. Riders who had dismissed the earlier Scramblers as fashion statements now found themselves faced with a machine that looked ready for punishment, and curiosity spread quickly. This was where the Desert Sled's true story unfolded, not in brochures or spec sheets, but in sand, gravel, and rocky tracks. Microstory, first ride reactions. Early test riders took the Desert Sled into conditions far harsher than most Scrambler owners had ever attempted. Reports came back praising the improved stability, the comfort of the taller suspension, and the sense that the bike finally felt at home off tarmac. Yet it was not without flaws. Its weight still made it challenging in deep sand, and aggressive riders sometimes found its limits. But the fact that it was genuinely capable marked a major shift in perception. Context Digest, the lifestyle critics. Even as positive reviews rolled in, critics argued that most owners would never exploit the Desert Sled's off-road abilities. To them, it was another case of selling a rugged image to riders who stuck to asphalt. However, Ducati countered that perception itself mattered. Having the capability unlocked confidence, even if riders only occasionally ventured off-road. In this way, the Desert Sled was less about hardcore competition and more about freedom of possibility. Micro-story. Customization culture. Owners quickly began to personalize their Desert Sleds, blending retro styling with adventure functionality. Some added racks and soft luggage for weekend trips. Others swapped exhausts to highlight its throaty note. This customization wave was important because it echoed the 1960s Desert Sled spirit. Those original bikes were never standardized, but always modified by riders to fit the terrain. Ducati's modern interpretation created a canvas for that same creativity. Reflection bridge. Each successful ride and each new owner story reinforced that the Desert Sled wasn't just a marketing experiment, it was a platform with authentic roots. Micro story, crossing into adventure touring. Although Ducati never pitched the Desert Sled as a full adventure bike, many owners began using it for long-distance travel, mixing pavement stretches with dirt roads. Its upright ergonomics and stable suspension made it surprisingly comfortable for multi-day trips. This crossover use blurred boundaries and showed that Ducati had tapped into a versatile formula that extended beyond its original brief. Context Digest. The European and American split. Interestingly, reactions differed between markets. In Europe, the Desert Sled was often seen as a stylish commuter with weekend potential, while in the US, especially in the Southwest, it was embraced as a legitimate desert plaything. That divergence highlighted how cultural landscapes shape the way motorcycles are perceived, and it underscored the importance of Ducati leaning into American desert heritage for the model's identity. Micro-story. Remembering Malcolm Smith. Among enthusiasts, conversations often turn to legendary desert racers like Malcolm Smith, whose exploits in the Mojave defined the original Desert Sled era. By reviving the name, Ducati invited comparison to those rugged machines. While no modern motorcycle could replicate the stripped-down simplicity of those days, the Desert Sled carried forward the adventurous ethos, reminding riders of a time when dirt riding was about improvisation and resilience. Reflection bridge. The more the Desert Sled was used in the wild, the more it began to bridge nostalgia with a modern understanding of what retro could mean. Micro-story. The price of style. At launch, the Desert Sled cost notably more than Japanese dual sports, putting it in an unusual market position. Some argued that the premium was for style and brand cachet, while others believed the engineering justified the price. The debate only fueled its mystique, because buying one was not simply about function, but about choosing a machine that represented both freedom and fashion. Context Digest. Competing with its own brand. Ducati also had to balance the Desert Sled against its multi-strata adventure lineup. While the multi-strata offered touring comfort and advanced electronics, the Desert Sled appealed to riders seeking raw simplicity. This internal dynamic showed Ducati's strategy to diversify, offering both high-tech adventure and retro adventure under one roof. Micro-story. From magazines to Instagram, the Desert Sled became a visual darling, appearing in glossy photo spreads and countless social media posts. Images of it kicking up dust or parked against a desert sunset reinforced the dream Ducati was selling. Yet behind those images were real stories. Riders who discovered trails they'd never dared before, empowered by a bike that looked as good as it rode. Micro-story. The community effect. Local scrambler groups started forming, and within them, Desert Sled owners often emerged as leaders. They could guide rides off pavement, showing others that retro styling did not mean fragility. In this way, the Desert Sled elevated the Scrambler family as a whole, giving it depth beyond surface-level appeal. Context Digest. The broader industry. Response: other manufacturers watched closely. Triumph's Scrambler 1200, released later, bore clear signs of influence, pushing further into serious off-road territory. Even smaller brands experimented with rugged retro offerings. Ducati had sparked a trend where retro no longer meant delicate. It could mean durable, adventurous, and modern. Micro-story. The dual identity. Perhaps the Desert Sled's most fascinating legacy is its ability to live in two worlds. On weekdays, it could serve as a stylish city commuter, drawing glances with its distinctive retro silhouette. On weekends, it could be ridden down a dirt trail, bouncing over rocks without flinching. That duality is what made it compelling, because it mirrored the lives of modern riders who wanted one bike to express many identities. And so, what began as a gamble transformed into a cultural pivot point. The Desert Sled had proven that Ducati could credibly connect with an entirely new segment of riders. But its longer-term significance would only become clear in the years that followed, as its influence rippled outward across the motorcycle world. As the Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled settled into the motorcycle landscape, its long-term significance began to reveal itself. What started as a niche variant in the Scrambler family grew into a symbol of how retro design could coexist with authentic off-road ability. Riders, journalists, and even rival manufacturers began to treat the Desert Sled as more than just a single model year. It was a statement about where the industry was heading. Micro-story. A new kind of rider. The Desert Sled attracted a demographic Ducati had rarely reached before. These were not track day enthusiasts chasing lap times, nor were they world travelers investing in large adventure tourers. Instead, they were everyday riders who wanted style and spirit, but also the reassurance that their bike could handle gravel roads and desert trails. This group represented a growing middle ground in motorcycling, riders seeking experiences, not extremes. Context Digest: influence on Ducati's image. Historically, Ducati's identity revolved around performance and Italian design, with iconic models like the 916 Superbike or the Monster shaping its reputation. The Scrambler line broadened that image, but the Desert Sled in particular proved Ducati could also speak the language of rugged exploration. This subtle shift gave the brand credibility in lifestyle markets without diluting its racing prestige. Micro-story: inspiring competitors. When Triumph launched the Scrambler 1200, many reviewers noted it as a direct answer to the Desert Sled. Other brands began exploring heritage-inspired off-roaders, blurring lines between retro and adventure categories. Ducati had sparked a movement, showing that there was an audience hungry for machines that combined the romance of the past with the resilience of modern engineering. Reflection bridge. In this way, the Desert Sled's impact reached beyond sales. It reshaped how retro motorcycles were defined. Micro-story. The owner legacy: Desert Sled riders often documented their adventures online, sharing photos and stories of desert crossings, mountain trails, and urban escapes. Over time, these narratives built a collective identity around the bike. The Desert Sled wasn't just a Ducati. It became shorthand for a lifestyle that valued versatility, style, and discovery. This community-driven storytelling gave the model cultural endurance well beyond its production run. Context Digest: retro as a movement. By the late 2010s, the motorcycle market saw a wave of retro-themed bikes, from cafe racers to flat trackers. Yet many of these were criticized for being skin-deep, prioritizing aesthetics over performance. The Desert Sled stood out precisely because it crossed that line, delivering genuine mechanical changes to back up its styling cues. It became proof that retro could be more than nostalgia. It could be innovation wearing classic clothes. Micro-story: the emotional payoff. For riders who grew up hearing stories of desert racing or watching films that immortalized those eras, the Desert Sled was more than a motorcycle. It was a time machine that let them participate in a dream, connecting to a rugged heritage while enjoying modern reliability. This emotional resonance was powerful, making the Desert Sled not just a product but a bridge between generations. Reflection bridge. The deeper one looks, the clearer it becomes that the Desert Sled was never about dominating sales charts. It was about broadening the meaning of motorcycling. Micro-story. From marketing to myth. Ducati had marketed the Desert Sled with glossy campaigns, but over time, the riders themselves gave it mythological weight. Stories of long road trips, Successful off-road challenges and personal transformations fueled its reputation. It grew into more than Ducati could control, which is the sign of a model that truly resonates. Context digest. Industry lessons learned. Competing brands realize that authenticity sells, and that riders are quick to sense when style is hollow. The Desert Sled taught the industry that if you evoke heritage, you must back it up with capability. That lesson rippled outward, leading to more thoughtful designs across categories. Microstory. Lasting symbolism. Today, when riders or collectors look back at the 2017 Desert Sled, they see a moment when Ducati dared to take a risk. It represented a willingness to step outside the company's comfort zone, to honor a distinctly American tradition, and to expand what retro could mean in the modern age. Its legacy lies not in numbers, but in the way it redefined expectations. And so, the Desert Sled closes its chapter not as just another Scrambler variant, but as a cultural artifact in motorcycling history. It reminded riders that the past can inspire the present, that style and substance do not need to be enemies, and that sometimes the dustiest roads lead to the most enduring stories. The story of the 2017 Ducati Scrambler Desert Sled leaves us with a striking reminder of how motorcycles can embody more than metal and horsepower. They can carry culture, memory, and aspiration. From the moment it was unveiled, the Desert Sled invited us to revisit the golden age of desert racing while testing whether modern engineering could still capture that raw spirit. It answered critics who doubted Ducati's ability to build something rugged, it bridged gaps between heritage and adventure, and it sparked an industry trend toward retro machines with real-world credibility. Looking back, what makes the Desert Sled remarkable is not that it was perfect. It wasn't. Its weight, price, and limited off-road extremes kept it from being a hardcore dirt machine. But that was never the point. Its mission was to prove that authenticity and style could coexist, that a motorcycle could be both a fashion statement and a capable companion on dusty trails. In achieving that, it carved out a unique cultural niche and expanded Ducati's image far beyond the track. Today, whether you see it as a retro adventure bike, a lifestyle symbol, or simply a bold experiment, the Desert Sled holds a lasting place in motorcycling's evolving story. It showed riders that nostalgia can be functional, and that heritage is most powerful when it inspires action, not just admiration. For Ducati, it was a gamble that paid off in brand credibility and in the hearts of a new generation of riders. For the wider industry, it served as a blueprint for how to honor the past without being trapped by it. And for owners, it became a trusted companion, one that looked as good parked at a cafe as it did covered in dust. In the end, the Desert Sled's greatest achievement may be that it reminded us why we ride in the first place: to seek freedom, to tell stories, and to connect with a history larger than ourselves. Thanks for riding with us on Octane Origins. See you next time, automotive enthusiasts.